Interestingly, it doesn't show how many people have logged in.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to see that from our side.
I think we're live, folks. I see us on the YouTube side. So, alrighty. Welcome everyone. This is really exciting to be able to gather with you all today on this Saturday to celebrate ceremonies, as the title of this session says. So before we get started, though, I do want to make sure we give some space to introduce ourselves individually, say a little bit about who we are and where we're coming from before we jump into some readings. So I am Joshua Jenkins. I'm based out of DC. I am a theater organizer, marketer, and I am a co-creator of something called Black Gay Stuck at Home, a virtual bi-weekly film space with Michael Ward, who might be hanging out somewhere in the chat somewhere, maybe. So anyway, I'll kick it to Monty.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Josh. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We are just so glad to have everybody here to join us for this special, very special and important event. My name is Monty J Wolfe. I am an artist, actor, writer, director, producer, all of that shit. I do a lot. I am the founder of Brave Soul Collective, an arts education and outreach organization with a focus on issues affecting the Black LGBTQ community and people living with HIV and AIDS, as well as a core member of CMP, the Counter Narrative Project, who I imagine we have some of our CMP tribe on with this, and we want to shout them out and acknowledge them. And as well, just a family member of African American Collective Theater. I know we have Mr. Alan Sharp in the house as well. So all of those are my people who I'm super proud to be a part of their work, as well as the work that I do with Brave Soul Collective. But as Josh just stated, we are just so glad to have everybody on to be a part of this and to just share some reflections. We're going to be doing some readings of some pieces and just being able to talk about the significance and the relevance of Essex Hemphill and of his writing. So yeah, that's kind of where we are and what we'll be doing.
Christopher, you want to intro yourself?
Sure. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, y'all bear with me. I was trying to look at our list. And I'm sorry. So yes, I want to make sure we introduce our other two special guests who are just very dear friends of mine, and people who I've worked with and who I've known for years. Christopher Prince and Justin Smith, just both brilliant artists and just creatives in their own right. And Joshua and I, when we decided to do this, we were thinking long and hard on who we could ask to be a part of the whole event that would be significant and would bring something magical to this. And these were the two beautiful souls that we landed on. So with that, Christopher, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I too am glad that you are joining us on this Saturday afternoon. My name is Christopher Prince. I am a writer, singer, actor, poet, contemporary of Essex Hemphill. Essex and I met back in the 80s, and I was privileged to be part of that movement of Black gay artists that performed during that time period, along with Marlon and other people, Michelle Parkinson, Wason Jones, Larry Duckett. So it's a pleasure to be here and to share, again, Essex's work and my experiences with him.
Thank you, Chris. Justin?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Smith. I use he, him pronouns. I am a Black queer man living in Atlanta. By day, I work with an organization called Positive Impact Health Centers, which is an HIV service organization here in Atlanta. So many of you in DC are familiar with the Whitman Walker Clinic. So we're very similar to that kind of formation. But I've been doing work primarily in the HIV space, centering my work on communities of Black, gay, and bisexual men for about the last 20 years. But I also believe that the arts and culture are central to our healing. So I approach this work not only from the framework of public health, but also from the framework of art and culture. And so Essex Hemphill is one of the artists that really spoke to my soul in a very profound way. So it's really an honor to be a part of this celebration of his life and his legacy alongside this really amazing panel of folks. I'm also a member of the Counter Narrative Project, or CNP. So shout out to the CNP tribe, and just excited to be here and to do this work alongside these fabulous brothers. So I'm ready to get right into it.
Yes, thank you, Justin. Thank you both. And again, thank you both for being here and for agreeing to be a part of this. I think when Josh and I initially agreed to put this together and come up with it, you know, we didn't really know exactly what it was going to look like, but we knew we wanted other voices besides our own to be a part of this. And when we started putting it all together about a month ago, it all just started to fall in place. So I'm just super grateful to have you all be a part of this, and super grateful for everybody that is watching. So hopefully this will be something that will that you all will enjoy. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a group reading of a very, a short part of one of Essex Hemphill's most popular pieces and well-known pieces called The Tomb of Sorrow. So the four of us are going to just do a quick reading of part 2 of that, and then we will kind of go from there in terms of some of the other things that we have planned. So if everybody is ready with that, this is Tomb of Sorrow, section 2.
When I die, honey child, my angels will be tall, black drag queens. I will eat their stockings as they fling them into the blue shadows of dawn. I will suck their purple lips to anoint my mouth for the utterance of prayer.
My witnesses will have to answer to go-go music. Dancing and sweat will be required at my funeral.
Someone will have to answer the mail I leave, the messages on my phone service. Someone else will have to tend to the aching that drove me to seek soul.
Everything different tests my faith. I have stood in places where the absence of light allowed me to live longer, while at the same time it rendered me blind. I struggle against plagues,
Plots,
pressure,
Paranoia.
Everyone wants a price for my living.
When I die, my angels, immaculate black diva drag queens, all of them sequined and seductive.
Some of them will come back to haunt you. I promise, honey child.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. So yeah, I think this is one that we all kind of landed on, because I think as we kind of bleed into this next piece of what we wanted to do, which is really just to talk about the significance of Essex Hemphill and his legacy and his words, and how a lot of those are just really super relevant now. Josh, did you have anything you wanted to kind of chime in on about that?
Yeah, I think it's important. We are certainly about to do some individual readings, but I think it's good to ground us. It was good to ground us in a group piece at the top of this, sort of representative of a lot of the collective and collaborative movement making that was happening with Essex and contemporaries. So I think it's kind of cool to have us start that way. But I'm excited to for us to, I guess, begin our individuals. Are we ready to jump in there?
Yeah, because I guess some of what we're going to talk about in terms of, I think, well, what I can say as before we, I guess, just to intro these, when Josh and I were, kind of curating this whole thing and putting it together, we kind of looked to the fact that, like I said, I don't even know when I found my way to Essex Hemphill and his writing, but I know that reopening one thing that always happens, every time I open it and read something, like I'm discovering something new, and I've had it for years. But this particular time, when I reopened the book and started looking at things, it was terrifying to think about how some of this stuff is so on the nose right here, right now in this moment, with all of the stuff that's going on with politics and propaganda and the pandemic and all of these other kinds of things, and even things around feminism, because Essex spoke about a lot of things with regard to feminism as well. So I think that the pieces that you're about to hear us read individually, we picked those intentionally because we wanted to kind of zero in on some of the stuff where there are like nuggets, and as I call them, pearls. He left us a whole lot of pearls of just wisdom and things that sadly were true and relevant 30 years ago. But, you know, as I said in one of the previews to all of this, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah. So with that, I guess we're gonna, we can let Josh go. I think you're going first.
Yeah, so I'm going to begin with a very timely piece called The Occupied Territories. You are not to touch yourself in any way or be familiar with ecstasy. You are not to touch anyone of your own sex or outside of your race. Then talk about it. Photograph it, write it down in explicit details, or paint it red, orange, blue, or dance in honor of its power, dance for its beauty, dance because it's yours. You are not to touch other flesh without a police permit. You have no privacy. The state wants to seize your bed and sleep with you. The state wants to control your sexuality, your birth rate, your passion. The message is clear. Your penis, your vagina, your testicles, your womb, your anus, your orgasm, these belong to the state. You are not to touch yourself or be familiar with ecstasy. The erogenous zones are not demilitarized.
Whew. So
if that's
case
not
in point,
timely as hell, if we need to guide folks a little bit more specifically to, you know, there's a lot of direct reference, but bringing it into now as we look at abortion rights in particular being at the top of a lot of folks' mind in this country, it is a very timely piece that, and even as we think about the current situation with monkeypox and the stigmatization around monkeypox, especially within the LGBTQIA community, it's really kind of scary how you could drop this right now on any stage and it would elicit the strength and the same sort of response, I would imagine. So I'm glad we got to do that one.
Thank you, Josh. So who do we think? I think we have Chris coming up next.
Piece I've chosen is To Some Supposed Brothers. Essex was very much a feminist, very much believed in acknowledging the power of Black women, Black gay women, our mothers, our sisters. And this piece, I think, is still relevant to some of the miscommunication that goes on between men and women. You judge a woman by the length of her skirt, by the way she walks, talks, looks, and acts, by the color of her skin you judge, and will call her bitch. Black bitch if she doesn't answer to your, hey baby, what you gonna say to a man? You judge a woman by the job she holds, by the number of children she has had, by the number of digits on her check, by the many men she may have lain with, and wonder what Jive Murphy, what Jive Murphy you'll run on her this time. You tell a woman every poetic love line you can think of, then, like the desperate needle of a strung out junkie, plunge into her veins, travel wildly through her blood, confuse her mind, make her hate, and be cold to the men to come, destroying the thread of calm she held. You judge a woman by what she can do for you alone, but there's no need for slaves to have slaves. You judge a woman by impressions you think you have made. Ask and she gives. Take without asking. Beat on her and she'll obey. Throw her name up and down the streets like a loose whistle, knowing her neighbors will talk. Her friends will chew her name. Her family's blood will run loose like a broken creek. And when you're done, a woman is left healing her wounds alone. But we so-called men, We so-called brothers wonder why it's so hard for us to love our women when we're about loving them the way America loves us.
Thank you, Chris. Again, right on the nose. And that's one, like I was saying, when we were going through things this time, I'm gonna be honest, that piece had completely, like I'd read it before and I'd seen it, but it didn't land until like now when, you know, all of these things around just the ways that we have had to, you know, be intentional about amplifying Black women and celebrating and protecting Black women, you know what I'm saying? And holding ourselves accountable for misogyny and just a lot of bullshit that, you know what I'm saying, that is a part of, you know, just the fabric of this fucking country and just a lot of what happens. And when I went back and read this again, I'm like, wow, this man was writing about this 30 years ago. So obviously it was present and, you know, and relevant then, but for us to open it up 30 years later and see just how, you know, significant it is pretty powerful.
Profound.
So thank you, Chris.
Profound.
Very.
And just to kind of jump on that, if I may, I mean, I think about, it almost seems like he pre-anticipated sort of the Kevin Samuels of the world, right? You know, like that's a direct response to him.
Mm-hmm.
That was written 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he saw this moment, I mean, because those conversations were happening then, but when I think about the ways that with kind of, you know, YouTube podcast culture, there's so many Black men who make it their business to essentially, you know, profit from trashing Black women, right? So, you know, so I think this piece is very, you know, germane to our times now. So I am just glad that you brought that back up to our consciousness, Christopher.
And my approach to it was kind of reminiscent of some of the way we used to arrange it. Because there was a time when that piece was done with two voices. And it had that very syncopated, it wasn't done in normal speech. It had a very syncopated approach to it with the repetition of lines, with the speeding up and the slowing down, with the going up and, you know, so I was trying to bring some of that to the forefront as well for those who might not have been able to experience that.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Chris. So Justin, you're up next. You ready?
Yeah. So I'm going to read. It's hard to pick a favorite Essex poem, but this is sort of definitely among my favorites of his work. Again, as I mentioned in my introduction, I work in the HIV space, and obviously a lot of Essex's work contended with questions around HIV. And so I think I'll just read the piece and I'll kind of reflect on it a little bit more. This piece is Now We Think. Now we think as we fuck. This nut might kill us. There might be a pin-sized hole in the condom, a lethal leak. We stop kissing tall, dark strangers, sucking mustaches, putting lips, tongues everywhere. We return to pictures, telephones, toys, recent lovers, private lives. Now we think as we fuck. This nut might kill. This kiss could turn to stone. So that piece always, for me, hits. And obviously, he's talking about HIV in this piece. And unfortunately, that is still a condition that we are still very much contending with 30 years from the time he wrote this piece. And as we are in the middle of sort of two pandemics, well, monkeypox isn't technically a pandemic, but you know, as we deal with COVID and now with the emergence of the monkeypox outbreak, which, you know, if you don't know, is also having a disproportionate impact on Black, gay, and bisexual men. This piece really does continue to speak to our moment. And I think particularly because of all of the conversation around harm reduction with respect to monkeypox and sort of the guidance around, you know, literally one of the things that you know, was offered is like, yeah, you should, you know, go back to phone sex or cyber sex and, you know, jerk off 6 feet away from someone else, right? You know, so I think he's talking about that moment in sort of the early stages of the HIV outbreak in the 80s, right? When, you know, in many ways, while there was no official kind of government response, community really took it upon ourselves to figure out how do we take care of each other in the absence of resources, in the absence of data and science. How do we care for our people? And in much the same way with monkeypox, we're finding ourselves in that same situation, you know. So again, this piece just is always for me, for a whole host of reasons, both personally, professionally, it's always something that is on time. But I find that to be sad, right? The fact that, you know, we always have to sort of be in a space where, as Black gay and bisexual men, as Black same gender loving men, as Black queer men, as Black people in general, there is this linkage between our sexuality and sickness and death, right? And what would it mean for us to really be in a place where we could experience sexual liberation? So that's some of the things that for me, when I engage with this piece, that's what I think about.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. And as you were speaking, like you said, I think you said you found it sad, but it's triggering, it's jarring, and it's triggering as fuck to me because, like you said, the piece being written with the intention of HIV and AIDS being the source material 30 years ago. Okay, we had that, okay? And then, you know, looking back 30 years later now, or even 2 years ago, you know, 28 years or whatever, it still had relevance with regard to HIV and AIDS. Then when COVID entered the fucking picture, it's like, okay, then it took on a whole other meaning. But the scariest fuck part is that right here, right now, in this moment with monkeypox and all the stuff that you talked about, it's history repeating itself in a way that is frightening. It's very scary because there's so much that I've heard some of the elders and other people who were around at that time talk about the stigma that they faced in terms of how nurses and people didn't want to touch certain people that were HIV positive or that had AIDS because they were afraid of, you know, catching something or contracting something. And for a whole generation of us, we didn't have a frame of reference for that. And what's scary and frightening now is that it's like we are getting a crash course in maybe like a 16th of what those generations who came before us, a lot of whom are no longer here, but we're getting a crash course in what that must have felt like because we got hit with COVID. Now we're getting hit with monkeypox. And this is something that it feels like the walls are starting to close in on us with regard to how we seek and experience intimacy, how we, like you said, harm reduction, trying to minimize risk, trying to, enjoy sex or having pleasure or any of those kinds of things. And then just also feeling like we've always known this, but there's a fucking target on our heads because that's what this feels like.
One of the powerful things that Essex did in his writing was, in light of that dynamic, still be able to celebrate our sexuality, still be able to find pleasure and power in who we are as sexual beings. It's a very fine line to walk that dichotomy, and Essex was able to do that in many of his poems and essays.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I think that's what is just kind of frightening about and significant about this particular piece that Justin just read, because like I said, it's almost like there are layers. If you keep peeling back the layers, the relevance and the significance of it is just kind of like, damn, this is like, this is really where we are. And like that kind of almost piggybacking off of what Josh read in his piece about, you're not to touch yourself. You know what I'm saying? You're not to do this, you're not to do that, because the Supreme Court and these people, you know what I'm saying, that are just miserable and, racist as fuck, you know what I'm saying? Homophobic and transphobic and all of these things, just problematic all across the board, really seem to feel and think that they have, the right to tell somebody else how they can, what they can do with their bodies, particularly a lot of men, you know what I mean? Who don't even, who have, right, who have no right or even earthly idea what women have to go through with regard to abortion and making any of those kinds of decisions or even any of those other kinds of things around sex. But yes, and in the spirit of that, I'm going to lead into that. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of looking at some of the comments in the chat here. I just want to read this very quickly. Benjamin Bagocius, he says, yeah, I've always found it painful how people so quickly reacted to COVID to the extent that they quickly found a vaccine for it while the response to the AIDS pandemic largely went ignored. So yeah, it's just, you know, like I said, the relevance of these works is just very, very powerful. But just to continue in the interest of time, the piece that I selected is called Cordon Negro. And it is one of my favorite pieces of from Essex Hemphill. I feel like I identify with a lot of his work, but this is one because it speaks to something that I kind of gave a phrase to years ago when we did a show with Brave Soul Collective at the Kennedy Center called Black Gay Rage. And that's what I feel like I walk with and I live with, is this rage that's right beneath the surface, that at any point in time, the shit could just go off and it would not be good at all. So with that, Cordon Negro. I drink champagne early in the morning instead of leaving my house with an M16 and nowhere to go. I'm dying twice as fast as any other American between 18 and 35. This disturbs me, but I try not to show it in public. Each morning I open my eyes as a miracle. The blessing of opening them is temporary on any given day. I could be taken out. I could go off. I could forget to be careful. Even my brothers hunt me. I am the only one who values my life. And sometimes I don't even give a damn. My love life can kill me. I'm faced daily with choosing violence or a demeanor that saves every other life but my own. I won't cross over. It's time someone else came to me, not to patronize me physically, sexually, or humorously. I'm sick of being an endangered species, sick of being a goddamn statistic. So, what are my choices? I could leave with no intention of coming home tonight. I could go crazy downtown and raise hell on a rooftop with my rifle. I could live for a brief moment on the 6 o'clock news, or I can masquerade any other day through the corridors of commerce and American dreams. I'm dying twice as fast as any other American. So I pour myself a glass of champagne. I cut it with a drop of orange juice. After I swallow my liquid value, my private celebration for being alive this morning, I leave my shelter. I guard my life with no apologies. My concerns are small and personal.
Whew.
Yeah, right.
I love that piece. That's
I'll let one of your
favorites. I love that piece.
Yeah, like when I first read that years ago, I'm sorry, Josh, did you get that note? There's a note they just sent us internally. I just want to make sure you saw it. But yeah, just take a look at the note inside the chat, the Zoom chat, Josh. Yeah, so I'm sorry, y'all, give me 1 second. Bear with us 1 minute here.
Well, while you're waiting, let me say this. But when it comes to that point, one of the things that I appreciate about Essex's impact, not only on literature, but on our community, was he was one of the voices that helped to construct a radical Black gay identity. During that time of the 80s and 90s, it was, as he said, a revolutionary act for Black men to be loving Black men, not only in a sexual sense, but in an interpersonal way. But what Essex held, which I think was unique, was a radical Black gay voice. He did not shy away from being angry. He did not shy away from issues of class. He did not shy away from addressing misogyny. He did not shy away from the details of our sexuality. Often during that period, again, our visibility was a big step within itself, but we were often neutered. And I think that even happens now, that the gay personality is a neutered personality, or it's an effeminized personality. Not to say that's lesser, but that's just where they want to go. So that element of being specific about who you are and what you do in bed, that power of harnessing your anger, because anger is a righteous human emotion and is not one that, Black folk, they want to take us away and we can't be angry, regardless of our sexuality, is very important. And that radical Black gay voice is the banner that Essex held high.
Yes, thank you for that, Christopher. And I think, yeah, all of that's true. Justin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to tap in. I mean, I think when we talk about the relationship between sort of the cohort of, the Essex and the Marlins of the world, and just their influence by Black feminists. And I think that radical articulation of Black gay identity as one that is radical, I think is really a teaching that we picked up from our sisters in many ways, right? And so when we talk about how Essex was very intentional and deliberate about the explicit conversation about Black gay sexuality and Black gay sex acts, I think that's a lesson that we got from Audre Lorde when she talks about the erotic as a form of power. And so I think something else that I think is such an important lesson that we get from Essex is, again, just to know that Black women have so much to teach us, and they have been doing that. And for us to also be able to show up for them, right? And I think that there is this conversation that, particularly for Black gay men, that we, often seen as not having anything to contribute to the larger Black community. And I think Essex was also very specific about the unique talents and gifts that we bring. And I think that's just something else that needs to be kind of uplifted and celebrated. And again, I think that connection and lessons that they learned from kind of the Black queer women that were writing at that time, the Black lesbians that were writing at that time, is something that I think, we as, contemporary Black gay men also need to continue to do.
Yeah, I agree, Justin. So to that end, we're going to read, I think we're each going to select a couple more pieces to read because we're looking pretty good on time. So with that, Chris, do you want to read Loyalty? I think that was the one you had selected. Okay.
This is the last 3 paragraphs of Essex's essay, Loyalty, from Ceremonies. I speak for thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of men who live and die in the shadow of secrets, unable to speak of the love that helps them endure and contribute to the race. Their ordinary kisses, stolen or shared behind facades of heroic achievement. Their kisses of sweet spit and loyalty are scrubbed away by the propaganda makers of the race, the talented 10th, who would just as soon have us believe Black people can fly, rather than reveal that Black men have been longing to kiss one another and have been doing so for centuries. The Black homosexual is hard pressed to gain audience among his heterosexual brothers, even if he is more talented. He is inhibited by his silence or his admissions. This is what the race has depended on in being able to erase homosexuality from our recorded history, the chosen history. But these sacred constructions of silence are futile exercises in denial. We are not going away with our issues of sexuality. We are coming home. It is not enough to tell us that one was a brilliant poet, scientist, educator, or rebel. Whom did he love? It makes a difference. I can't become a whole man simply on what is fed to me, watered down versions of Black life in America. I need the ass-splitting truth to be told. So I have something pure to emulate, a reason to remain loyal.
The ass-splitting truth.
The ass-splitting truth.
That term right there. I mean, could it be any more clear?
And even though we are, we're living in an era of visibility. All of us are still not visible. And historically, some of us and our sexuality is still erased. We've managed to come around to realizing that the sister that the Queen Latifah played, the jazz singer. You guys know what I'm talking about. Bessie, okay, we come around to acknowledging that Bessie Smith was family. Okay. We always knew that the brother that worked with Duke Ellington, that wrote the lyrics for him was family. But there's a lot of us that are still buried in history that are not visible. There are still some of us that are contributors intellectually, politically, culturally to the movement that do not feel secure enough to come out in their wholeness. Not that it's always necessary for everyone. So I acknowledge that as well. It is a choice. And we as consenting adults make choices on how much of ourselves we want to reveal. However, there is power in you revealing as much of your authentic self as you can. There's power. The closer you get to your authenticity, the more power you become. And the more beneficial your contribution to the race is. So I found that piece to be, particularly poignant. And I loved it. Essex used to perform that piece. He would, so I could hear his voice, but I saw that he would tear that piece up. So
I can only imagine. So thank you for that, Christopher.
Thank you, Al. So, Billy Strayhorn. Yeah, thank you,
Al. Justin, you want to go next and read In the Life?
Yes. I'll just go into it and then we'll talk about it after I finish reading In the Life from Ceremonies. Mother, do you know I roam alone at night? I wear colognes, tight pants, and chains of gold as I search for men willing to come back to candlelight. I'm not scared of these men. Those sons are killers of sons like me. I learned there is no tender mercy for men of color, for sons who love men like me. Do not feel shame for how I live. I chose this tribe of warriors and outlaws. Do not feel you failed some test of motherhood. My life has borne fruit no woman could have given me anyway. If one of these thick-lipped, wet, black nights while I'm out walking, I find freedom in this village. If I can take it with my tribe, I'll bring you here, and you will never notice the absence of rice and bridesmaids. So I think for me, this piece is significant on a lot of levels. I think, when I first kind of got introduced to Essex when I was a freshman in college, I still wasn't out to my family. And actually didn't come out to them until I was 25. And I remember kind of reading this piece as a way to kind of gather the strength to be able to have this conversation that I've been putting off for so long. And I think, what I love about the piece and what kind of gave me strength in it is he talks about his village, right? He talks about the fact that he chose this tribe of warriors and outlaws, right? He's got people, right? And for me, that was such an important piece for me to kind of lean into, is that I love my family of origin, but I also have a really powerful family of choice. And those are the people that really hold me down, right? And so to kind of celebrate that is really, really important. And so I love that about this piece, right? Because it does sort of have that reminder, that we have, freedom in this village. And, that's a title of another anthology of Black gay writing was taken from that. So there's a lot of reasons I love this piece. And I remember it's also kind of a poem that's featured in Tongues Untied. And so that's kind of how I first got sort of connected to it, which was, you know, as I tell people, as many people want to listen, my freshman year of college, someone gave me a copy of In the Life and Brother to Brother. And I remember like within my first 2 months of my freshman year, I watched Tongues Untied, and that just really blew my mind, because as simple as it sounds, like I didn't know that I could be both Black and gay. And that sounds stupid, right? You know, but at that time, at 18 years old, I honestly thought that like there weren't Black gay men, you know? I mean, obviously I knew that there were Black gay men, but not as a political construction, right? And not that I had sort of a whole history of folks that came before me. And so for me, that was such a powerful, you know, revelation that honestly saved my life and changed my life. And so, you know, so this piece kind of is a reflection of that that personal transformation that Essex helped to bring about within myself.
Thank you, Justin. And I think I love what you just said about, you know, this piece kind of zeroing in on the fact that, yes, we have our families of origin, but for a lot of us as queer people, and what I'm finding is with a lot of heterosexual people as well, but, you know, the difference is with us, we didn't have the option, we don't have the luxury to not lean on chosen family because of the ways that we often are perceived and treated, and sometimes, you know, excommunicated or, you know, cast out of families because of, you know, embracing our sexuality or what have you. But I love that you pointed out that the piece speaks to the importance of chosen family, because sadly, that's something that we each have had to travel that road on our own. It's been very lonely, which is a segue into what I'm about to read. But I think that we each had to find our way into that. And I think that what this is a bit of, like, it's a bit of a badge of honor that we wear because we understand the importance of what it means to have chosen family. People that ain't your blood, that would draw blood for you or go to fucking bat and whoop a motherfucker's ass, as I would say, if they had to. So with that, I'm going to read Heavy Corners, and then we're going to kind of go into us doing some reflection, because we want to take advantage of the rest of the time that we have and allow you all. I encourage everybody to keep communicating in the chat, because we're going to kind of dive into that and try to interact with you all a little bit more. But I'm going to read Heavy Corners. Heavy Corners for Joe. As we know, you know, he had a very tight-knit, you know, relationship with Joseph Beam, who was one of his contemporaries. Don't let it be loneliness that kills us. If we must die on the front line, let us die men, loved by both sexes. Don't let it be envy that drives us to suck our thumbs, to shoot each other dead over snake eyes. Let us not be dancing with the wind on heavy corners tattered by doom. Let us not accept partial justice. If we believe our lives are priceless and we can't be conquered, if we must die on the front lines, don't let it be loneliness that kills us. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Christopher, you have anything you want to share about that piece or the significance of it?
You know, it's so short, but so powerful. And it, you know, it speaks again to what Justin was saying, but it's also relevant in this age of pandemic where isolation is a logical defense to things. You do it for your health, but it can be detrimental. It speaks to, so, you know, it just echoes in so many ways. There was a prophetic nature to Essex's writing, and I think it was because he was such an astute observer of human nature and politics. One of the things that always took me back in our relationship was his ability to distill, to look at what was going on and to distill what was rich from it, you know, and break through the noise. He and Michelle Parkinson were like that both in their writings. Our community was a vibrant one of writers, actors, singers, but few of us had the insight that Essex had, and then to couple that insight with a mastery of language and to be concise was part of his genius.
Absolutely. So with that, I guess we want to just kind of dive into letting each of us talk very briefly about if each, and maybe Josh, if you want to lead in with this and kind of talk about it, if we can each just share very briefly. And I think Justin, you started to do this, and Christopher, you've been doing this all along, but how each of us, like how we each found our way to Essex and his work, and what, what that, Justin, that sounds like you already, kind of pinpointed one of those things, but Josh, do you have any reflection on that?
Yeah, so I think I'm the baby in the room, maybe. I don't know how, we didn't do an age check, but I think I'm the baby in the room.
47.
And so I think what's interesting hearing, especially it's a privilege to be in this space, specifically with Christopher, I want to say, just because like I was born in '88, so I was sort of not until my fully realized adult self when someone slipped me Essex work. Shout out to my late friend Marcus White, who is sort of the guardian angel of all things queer for me, Black and queer for me, in my identity. And so it's interesting because it felt like, you're passing the note on under the table at the time. It felt very like this was not something that anybody else would be consuming, and it felt like a wink. It came with a wink and a nod, and I think that's the I will always feel that when I read Essex, is sort of who put me on is always intrinsically tied to how I read Essex work. That being said, I also realized that as Essex work, yes, culturally, politically is always relevant, but personally, with years and years and years, it still grows and it still evolves and serves me in a different way than it did when I was first reading it, for instance. So I think it's really powerful. I saw somebody in the chat say, we got to get this work back in print, because it does constantly make me wonder how to make sure that future generations of folks have it at their fingertips, and not just on a Tumblr page, which a lot of these poems do live on Tumblr, but like there's something about having a physical this piece in my head that it hits differently. And so a lot of my work really revolves around legacy, and so I'm really constantly wheels turning about how to make sure we're capturing not just these kinds of events, but also making sure that this work continues to live on. I do want to name something really quickly. There was a quote I was reading, The Reckoning mag from CMP did a piece a couple months ago, I think, about the legacy of Essex, and in it, and this sums it up for me at least, Ron Simmons was, we could do a whole event about Ron Simmons, but he said specifically about Essex work that he gave us a voice and we had never heard before. So many of us were living as marginalized souls with internalized guilt and shame. Then suddenly there was a writer whose work captured our fears, anger, confusion, frustration, passion, and desire as no artist had done before. He encouraged us to celebrate. Imagine that. We who were told that our God despised us.
Ashe. Thank you for that, Josh. So just so everybody knows, we have probably about 11 minutes left. So I want to make the absolute best use of this time, because we want to kind of wrap up some things and make sure you guys know about some resources and some places where you can access, Essex's work. And, Josh, if you want to just kind of read through some of that stuff when we get to it. I think I'll speak very briefly. And I'm glad that you read the piece from CMP, because Counter-Narrative Project and CMP and the work that Charles Stevens and Johnny Ray Cornegay III, and all of my brothers from CMP have done has been a huge cornerstone of my understanding, my celebration, and my reference points for Essex. And it is funny that comment came from Ron Simmons, because I worked at Us Helping Us. I worked under Ron for years. And it's just funny how, for me, it was one of those things with Essex Hemphill's work. I did not learn about it until years into me being into my journey, I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1995, in August of 1995. And then when I went back and did my research, it turns out my birthday is on November 4th. So that was the year I moved here in August of 1995. And I was just turning 21 at that point when I was moving here. And then when I read the back of this book, he died on November 4th, 1995. So he died on my birthday, the year that I landed in DC. So when I really started to think about it and think about me coming in contact with Ron and with Alan Sharp and with all of these other people, Christopher Prince and all these other people, Gregory Ford and all these other folks who, you know, who were in that universe, it feels to me like, okay, like just as his journey was ending, it was like mine was beginning. And even at that time, I didn't even know it because it took me years later to fall in line with people like Charles Stevens and Counter Narrative Project and all these other things. So I think it's just so significant. And it's one of those things. Ron did tell me something one year when we were doing something for Brave Soul Collective very early on. And I read a piece that I had written or something. And he came up to me at the end and he said, you know, you remind me of him in terms of the way that he said, you have this raw, very unapologetic thing that you do when you read. That's like, you know, it's like piercing. And at that time, I wasn't as familiar with Essex's work. So I was like, wow, thank you. You know what I'm saying? I was just grateful, you know, to hear that. But now when I go back and read pieces like Cordon Negro, I'm like, this is what he must have been talking about, because that feels like tapping into like, this is why you got to learn how to water bend or use that rage to your advantage so that you don't wind up dead or in prison. Because like I said, I'm this fucking close to snapping at any given moment. So yeah, I think there's that. And just very quickly, 2018, the NASM conference, Justin and I and Marlon Bailey, we did a presentation as part of CMP's, one of CMP's events. And it was a group of young Black gay men. And I think the group was called Build a Brother, right, Justin? It was a group called Build a Brother. And it was a group of young Black gay men. They had to be like in their, we call them babies. They were like 20. I think the oldest one might've been like in their 30s. But me and Justin and Marlon Bailey read like, I think like 3 or 4 pieces of Essex's from Ceremonies. And we stood up and we read them. And the look that we got from those babies in that room, it was like their eyes just got big. And so many of them spoke about like, why have I not heard about this? And why did I not know about this? Justin, you want to speak about that very quickly?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I feel like was modeled in the way that I came to Essex was that there were, you know, it was an older, like, you know, the person that gave it to me was a junior. So there was this passing of the torch and passing of this knowledge. And I felt like, you know, the NASM conference was really an opportunity to talk to, you know, younger brothers who hadn't been exposed to this work. And I will say that, I mean, that was one of the most transformative kind of spaces I've ever been into with other Black gay men, because I could tell that in much the same way that when I first encountered Essex, it was just like, wait, someone knows my life this deeply. And the type of sharing that just doing that reading inspired, right? You know, there was a young brother who had never talked about his HIV status publicly. You know, after kind of hearing Essex talk about that openly, he shared that with the room, right? You know, so there was this healing, this sort of power in the room that is still something that I get chills when I think about it, you know, and that was back in 2018, you know. So I think it goes to the importance of the work that folks like Joshua are doing, the work that CMP is doing to really try to preserve these legacies, because this work is like, he made this for us, right? You know, like he's, you know, I mean, Christopher is the only one of us that he knew personally, but I feel like Essex was writing, and I think a lot of the men of this generation, they knew that they were not going to survive. So they wrote down these messages, and it's for us. And so I think, you know, and I think one of the things that I think I'm very grateful to CMP in particular for, but it's like they take that mission very seriously to make sure
Absolutely.
that there is this kind of through line between generations.
It's a cornerstone.
It should not be the case. Yeah. It should not be the case that every generation we have to sort of remake ourselves. Like there is so much wisdom that has already been produced, and it's just there for us to utilize it. And that's what they did it for, you know? And so I think in that conference, we showed the model of kind of how that should be done within our communities. So yeah, it was, you know, it's still something, like I said, you know, Monte and I, whenever we talk about it, it's just like, wow, that was magic.
Yeah, we got chills. We got chills. They like they had never heard of him before. And it was like, you know how when you sit at your grandma's feet and she tells you something, or like an older person, and you're just sitting there like, wow, like it was that energy. But Christopher, I want to give you the last word on terms of a bit of a quick reflection, and then Josh, I'll let you lead into us just trying to review some of the things that we had in the slides. And I think hopefully what maybe me and Josh can do is maybe upload that slide to the Black Gay Stuck at Home website, and I know I can upload it to the Brave Soul site, so that if people want to see it and get all the details, we can, you know, they can see some of that information. But Christopher, you want to say anything?
Yeah, Justin, you know, it's interesting you said that Essex wrote that for us, which is true, but it also was a point of self-healing. There was a need during that time period for us just to come out from the shadow of what society put us, to come out from under the boot that our heterosexual brothers and sisters have put us under. And it was done with that in mind as an exorcism of some of our ills. It's a powerful thing that work is relevant. People here have talked about the fact of that Ceremonies is out of print, and that we should find a way to get it back in there. I don't know, you know, who has the rights to what, but I agree with that. I would also like to see the performance element of that stuff come back. It was, I'm getting emotional. It was a generation of great performers. Essex used to always say, the work has to survive on paper in order for it to live in the air. But to hear the work performed was just a powerful, powerful experience. And I'm just glad that, you know, and for that in mind, Fierceness served the Enoch Alley Coffee House.
I was going to ask you to plug it. I need you to talk about that. I need you to talk about that work. Yeah.
Documentary that we made last year about the coffee house, which is the birthplace of a lot of that creative movement. Essex, Michelle, me, Wason, Larry Duckett, Larry Duckett, or Wason Jones, we all performed in that space. It is a documentary short that we did that focuses on the legacy of that cohort, does some of the work, talks about the experiences of people that have went to the coffee house. So I encourage you to, if it's in your town, because we're trying to do the circuit now for festivals, go see it. Reach out to us if you are an educator and you want to see it. You can reach out to me at you can reach out to thecoffeehousedc@gmail. And you know, we want to try to get it in schools, etc., and try to continue to tell not only Essex's story, but that story of that whole cohort and the power that was Black Gay DC. This is OutWrite DC, and we have to raise a flag for the energy of Black creativity that is intrinsically DC.
DC, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And I'll just say this very quickly. I think you and Josh need to talk offline, because there might be some opportunities to make sure that Fierceness Served gets screened somewhere else too. But Josh, I'll let you take it away with the wrap up.
Cool. So yeah, folks, I think we're coming up on the end here, but I did want to maybe just really quickly, Christopher was generous enough to share some photos that I'd love to just make sure we take a look at for folks who are hanging out, and then also wrap up with, again, this is part of a slide deck that we will circulate either both through Black Gay Stuck at Home, but also through Brave Soul Collective. So
yeah, I'm sure we can convert it and I can upload it to a page on our site, and then we can plug it on our socials and stuff.
So I'm just going to share really quickly slideshow here.
And again, thank you all for being a part of this, everybody that signed on and everybody that's participating in this chat. This has just been magical. And it just feels so very powerful. And just looking at him, it gives me chills. Christopher, is there anything you want to share about any of these pictures as we kind of go through them?
Well, the ones that I'm included in that one in particular is from a 1988 performance of Dear Motherfucking Dreams that was done in New York City, Franklin Furnace. That's me in the middle, Essex there on the right, and Taj Johnson on the left. A great show. I can't find the scripture.
And yes, these are some of the other works by Essex Hemphill. And again, we'll try to make sure that we upload this to the individual sites where we're going to host this stuff. But those are some of the other books and things that we encourage you to check out. And these are some of those contemporaries, some that are in this room right now that we want to make sure that we acknowledge. But yeah, all of those are people who we want to acknowledge. And then those organizations like CMP, Black Gay Stuck at Home, Brave Soul Collective, Thrive SS, Us Helping Us, and LGBT Detroit. And if there are any others that people can think of in the chat that you want to, make note of or what have you, this is definitely about us uplifting each other. And one thing that I think is very significant and important is that even with all of those people that were involved with Tongues Untied and all those things, from hearing Ron and hearing other people speak about them, a lot of those brothers didn't know each other, and some of them did, but they just came together to make sure that things could get done because they knew that they had a call to action to save their own lives. And I feel like that's what we're doing in the spirit of that, to do that today. So thank you all for being a part of this. Josh, Chris, Justin, y'all got any parting words?
Tell somebody about Essex. Like, I see there's some activity in the chat around, uplifting the memory, and, legacy work is it's on us to make sure that we pass along what we can pass along. So I hope that folks, if it's their first time or if they're reliving Essex work today, I hope that they will tell someone else about Essex work to keep this going.
Absolutely. Gentlemen?
I'm good.
You good, Justin?
Yeah, just gratitude. I'm just very thankful to have been able to share this space with the three of you and with everyone that joined us virtually. And, it's always a good day to celebrate, the legacy and the life and the brilliance of Essex Hemphill. So I'm glad that we were able to do that on this 30th anniversary. So yeah, I just feel very grateful to have been a part of this.
And if you can get your hands on the book or do a search, dive into it and get into all of those pearls that he left us, y'all. Lastly, I want to say thank you to our interpreters who've been on to make sure that everybody can consume what it is that we've done. I want to acknowledge OutWrite and the brilliant team who helped to make sure all of this got done. I want to acknowledge all the brothers on the previous sessions who shouted us out, Doug Cooper Spencer and some of the other people, and just y'all continue to support the work of OutWrite and all the other events they have throughout the rest of the weekend. Everybody, please be safe, be careful, move with intention, be gentle with yourselves, keep the peace, but take no shit. And that's all I got.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much. It's been an experience. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, you.
Y'all. Good to see you all. Have a good day. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you. Wow. All right.
You know what?
We did it,
I don't know
y'all.
if you guys are going to be able to share those pictures that I have.
It's still live, y'all.
Well, yeah, but we'll we can break.